You know, have you ever stopped to think about what's really going on when you read a simple story to a kid? Well, today we're going to do just that. We're going to peel back the layers of a super basic children's book and uncover some pretty amazing science about how we learn, hiding right there in plain sight.
Okay, so let's start with our story. It's a really simple one called Tom and the Red Ball. And here he is. This is Tom.
And of course, he's got his favorite thing in the whole world, a bright red ball. I know, super simple, right? But just stick with me here. So what does he do? He gives that ball a good throw and it goes way up into the sky. One thing to notice here is the language. It's super simple, really active. Every single word is a clear action. And then he's off. He's scrambling to keep his eye on it. And yes, with a final jump, he catches it. See what's happening? We're getting this really clear sequence of events, and that is absolutely crucial for a kid's brain to start understanding cause and effect. And you can just feel his excitement, can't you? He's so happy he shouts, "Good ball." He's connecting what he did, the catch, with a positive result. That little bit of praise, even to himself, is a form of self-reinforcement. But, well, all good things must come to an end, right? The sun's getting pretty hot, so playtime is over, and it's time for Tom to head home. Okay, so, cute story. That's it, right? We're done? No way. Not even close. What we just read wasn't just a story about a boy and a ball. It was actually a full-on neurological workout for a young brain. So let's get into it and break down the science. All right, let's tackle the biggest question first. Why in the world are these super simple, even repetitive, stories so incredibly powerful? Well, it's because a kid's brain isn't really looking for some complicated, twisty plot. It's on a mission to find patterns and make connections. You know, storytelling is basically a masterclass in brain development. It's so much more than just hearing a fun story. A story like Tom's, it's introducing new words like throw and catch. It's building up their concentration as they follow the action. And it's even laying the groundwork for them to understand emotions, like that pure joy Tom felt when he caught the ball. And this brings us to something that I think any parent or caregiver knows all too well. That demand to hear the exact same story over and over and over again. Yeah, it can test your patience for sure. But for a child, this is a vital part of learning. So let's figure out why. The answer, it turns out, is pretty simple, but also really profound. As the expert Nicole Pearson puts it, kids literally thrive on repetition. For them, it's not boring at all. It's about mastery. Every single time they hear that story, it's reinforcing the pathways in their brain, making those connections stronger and faster. Here's a good way to think about it. Every time they hear it, their understanding gets deeper. They go from just hearing the story to actually anticipating it. And that process, it builds their memory, locks in new words, and, this is a big one, gives them a huge confidence boost when they guess what happens next. It's this amazing cycle of learning and reward. Okay, but learning isn't just about sitting and listening, right? The real magic, the really cool stuff happens when you go from just hearing the words to actually doing something with them. So let's talk about how to turn language into action. So there's this amazing teaching technique called total physical response, or TPR for short. Now, that sounds like a super fancy name, but the idea behind it is incredibly simple. You learn by doing. It's all about connecting a word directly to a physical action, completely skipping the need for any kind of mental translation. And this whole technique is just so intuitive. When the story says Tom jumps, guess what? You jump. When Tom runs, you run in place. By actually acting it out, you create this solid physical link between the word and what it means. And that makes the vocabulary so much stickier, way more memorable than just hearing a word by itself. And you know what? This whole interactive idea goes beyond stories. It works for just regular conversation too. Research actually shows that if you directly correct a kid's grammar, it can kind of make them shut down. So a much better way is to expand on what they say. So if they say something like, "We runned fast," instead of saying no, you say, "Yes, we ran so fast." See? You're validating what they said while also modeling the right way to say it. Okay, so we've got words connected to actions. That's huge. But what about the invisible stuff? You know, the architecture of the story itself, the plot, the characters, the setting. How do you teach that? Well, it turns out there's a surprisingly simple tool for that too. And here it is.
Now, this might just look like a plain old glove, but it's actually a genius little tool from Michigan State University Extension. It's called the Retelling Glove, and it's designed to help kids break down and really understand basically any story they hear. The absolute genius of this thing is its simplicity. It literally turns a kid's own hand into a guide for story structure. Each finger asks a question, guiding them through the key parts of a story. It's this really physical, tangible way to teach something as abstract as, literary analysis.
So let's try it with Tom's story, right? Okay, thumb. Who are the characters? Tom and his ball. Index finger. Where did it happen? Outside on a sunny day. You see, this super simple tool totally transforms a kid from just a passive listener into an active detective, figuring out the story.
Okay, so we've pulled apart a simple story, we've looked at some really powerful tools, but let's zoom out. What's the big takeaway here? Why does all of this matter so much for a child's development?
Really, it all comes down to this: the incredible power of a single, simple story. As long as you treat it not just as entertainment, but as a chance for some really deep interactive learning.
When you start putting all these simple techniques together, the repetition, the physical actions, the story breakdown, you're doing so much more than just reading a book. You are literally building the foundation for their future academic success. You're making their memory stronger, and maybe most importantly of all, you're sparking a love of reading that can last a lifetime. So I guess the biggest insight here is that the most powerful educational tools, they're not always the fanciest or the most expensive. Sometimes all you need is a simple story and just a willingness to play along. So the real question to leave you with is, what simple story are you going to turn into a learning adventure today?